The beastly duke left me for dead in his cave. He thought he was burying a helpless girl, but he was planting a seed that would grow into his destruction. Oh, astonishing, isn't it? But before we reveal how this incredible moment came to be, I have a question for you. Do you believe that destiny is written in the stars, or do we make it ourselves? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? I love reading you stories. Now, settle in, hit that subscribe button to join our family, and let me tell you the truth about what really happened. I can still feel the weight of that ballroom pressing down on me like a coffin lid. The grand ball of House Blackthorn. They called it a celebration, but I knew better. It was a gilded cage with walls made of silk and chains woven from family duty. The chandeliers blazed overhead, each crystal drop refracting light like 1,000 mocking eyes. Ladies swept past in gowns that cost more than most families saw in a year, their laughter high and brittle as breaking glass. The men prowled in their tailored coats, predators dressed as gentlemen, calculating dowries and alliances with every glance. I stood on the raised platform beside my father, Lord Blackthorn himself, feeling the eyes of 300 nobles crawling over my skin. My corset squeezed the breath from my lungs. The emerald necklace at my throat felt like a noose. Lords and ladies. My father's voice boomed across the hall, silencing the orchestra mid-note. It is my honor to announce the engagement of my daughter, Lady Elara Blackthorn, to Lord Fenris of House Wolfbane. The applause erupted like thunder, but all I could hear was the roaring in my ears as Fenris stepped forward to claim me. Lord Fenris. Even his name tasted like rot on my tongue. He was 50 if he was a day, with wet lips that reminded me of slugs and hands that lingered too long on every surface they touched. I'd seen the way he looked at the serving girls. I'd heard the rumors about his first wife's accident. He took my hand, pressing those revolting lips to my knuckles, and I felt my stomach heave. His breath reeked of wine and something sour beneath it. "My beautiful bride," he murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. His grip tightened. "We'll have such a intimate marriage." I looked to my mother, standing rigid beside father. Her face was a porcelain mask, carefully blank, but I saw the slight tremor in her gloved hands. She'd been sold like this once too. Now she was nothing but an ornament in my father's collection. Her spirit crushed so thoroughly she couldn't even meet my eyes. I would not become her. The thought crystallized in my mind with perfect, terrifying clarity. I looked at Fenris, at his possessive smile. I looked at my father, counting his new political advantages like gold coins. I looked at the ballroom doors, tall and open to the night gardens beyond. The choice was simple, really, inevitable. I would rather die free than live as another man's property. "Excuse me," I whispered, extracting my hand from Fenris's grip. "I need air." I didn't wait for permission. I didn't look back at my father's frown or Fenris's irritated huff. I walked, calmly at first, then faster, toward those doors, toward the darkness beyond, toward whatever came next. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I slipped into the gardens, but I welcomed it. Behind me, the music swelled again, covering my escape. They probably thought I was having a moment of bridal nerves. By the time they realized I wasn't coming back, I'd be gone. I gathered my skirts and ran. The freezing air tore at my lungs as I ran through the gardens, but after hours trapped in that sweltering ballroom, the cold felt like salvation. My slippers crunched on frost-covered gravel. The emerald silk of my gown, chosen by my father to match the family jewels, whipped around my legs like living things trying to drag me back. I could hear them now, voices rising from the ballroom. Someone had noticed my absence. My father would be furious. Fenris would be insulted. Good, let them rage. I'd be long gone. The garden path twisted through sculpted hedges and frozen fountains, leading toward the servants' gate at the estate's edge. If I could just reach the city streets, lose myself in the crowds. A shape materialized in the darkness ahead. Carriage, sleek and black as a raven's wing, with no house crest on its door. The driver must have stepped away. The door hung slightly ajar. It was perfect. I glanced back toward the manor. Lanterns were bobbing through the gardens now, spreading out like fireflies. They were searching for me. I had seconds. I hitched up my skirts and scrambled into the carriage, pulling the door shut behind me. The interior smelled of leather and something else, wood smoke and pine. I pressed myself into the corner of the velvet seat, heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. The voices drew closer. I held my breath. Lady Elara. That was Father's steward. Lady Elara, please. Your father demands you return at once. The footsteps passed within feet of the carriage. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying to God's I'd stopped believing in years ago. The footsteps faded. I sagged against the seat, dizzy with relief. I'd done it. The carriage lurched forward. My relief evaporated instantly. The wheels began to roll slowly at first, then picking up speed. We were moving, away from the manor, away from the searching servants. This was good. This was exactly what I needed. Except the carriage wasn't slowing. We hit the main road and the horses broke into a gallop. I grabbed the window frame as we careened around a corner, the city lights falling away behind us. The smooth cobblestones gave way to the rougher road that led to the moors. This was wrong. All wrong. I reached for the door handle, thinking wildly that I could jump, but we were going too fast now. The landscape outside had become a dark blur. Trees whipped past. The temperature inside the carriage dropped as we left the city's warmth behind. Where were we going? Why weren't we stopping? My hands were shaking. The adrenaline from my escape was curdling into something closer to terror. I pressed against the seat, trying to make myself small, invisible. That's when I realized the shadows in the corner opposite me were wrong. Too deep, too solid, too alive. And just what? A voice emerged from that darkness. Low, rough, like stones grinding together. Do we have here? I stopped breathing. A match flared, illuminating a face that made Lord Fenris look like a kindly grandfather. The flame caught the wick of a small lantern, and in its growing light, I saw him. The man was enormous, filling his corner of the carriage like a caged bear. His coat was black, his hair darker still, falling past his collar. But it was his face that froze the scream in my throat. A scar ran from his left temple down across his cheek, disappearing into his collar. In the lamplight, it looked like someone had tried to cleave his skull in half and nearly succeeded. His eyes were pale, gray or silver, impossible to tell, and they fixed on me with the intensity of a wolf spotting wounded prey. I knew that face. Everyone knew that face. Duke Kalen of Ravensshire, the beast of the northern holdings. And I had just trapped myself in his carriage. Well, his voice was deceptively calm. Are you going to answer, or shall I guess? Let me see. Emerald silk, blackthorn jewels, and the distinct scent of expensive perfume mixed with panic. He leaned forward slightly, and I pressed harder against my corner. You're the bride, the one who was supposed to marry Fenris tonight. I couldn't speak. My tongue had turned to lead in my mouth. Running away, were you? He settled back, studying me like I was a particularly interesting insect he'd found in his boot. Bold. Stupid. But bold. The carriage hit a rut and I bounced against the seat. We were deep in the moors now. Through the window, I could see nothing but darkness and the occasional skeletal tree clawing at the sky. Where are you taking me? The words came out as barely a whisper. To Ravensshire. Where else would I be going? He said it like it was obvious. Like kidnapping runaway brides was something he did every Tuesday. Ravensshire. The name alone made my blood run cold. The Duke's lands were notorious. Wild, desolate. Where the law meant nothing and Kalen's word was absolute. They said he'd killed 3 men in a single duel. They said he'd burned his own brother's estate to the ground over an insult. They said his first wife had thrown herself from the tower rather than spend another night in his bed. I thought I was escaping a monster when I fled Lord Fenris. I climbed into the cage of something far worse. Please, I heard myself say, hating the tremor in my voice. Let me go. Stop the carriage. I'll disappear. No one has to know. Oh, they'll know. A ghost of a smile touched his scarred face, and it was more frightening than his scowl. Your father is probably tearing the estate apart looking for you right now. Lord Fenris will be demanding satisfaction. And here you are, alone in my carriage, fleeing your own engagement. He tilted his head. Do you have any idea how that will look? My stomach dropped. He was right. Even if he let me go now, I was ruined. A lady alone with the beast of Raven's hire? My reputation would be ashes. Father would kill me himself. You're going to return me. It wasn't a question. No. The word was final as a headsman's axe. Hope flickered, desperate and foolish. Then you'll help me escape? His laugh was harsh and humorless. Help you? Girl, I don't even like you. You're a complication I didn't ask for, and I despise complications. The carriage began to slow. Through the window I could see lights in the distance, a village maybe or an estate. As we drew closer I realized it was neither. Just a few scattered cottages, their windows dark and shuttered. This was Ravensshire land. Empty. Forgotten. Dead. The carriage stopped. The Duke pushed open the door and stepped down into the mud without bothering with the steps. He turned back to look at me. Well, are you coming? Or shall I drag you? My legs wouldn't move. What are you going to do with me? You wanted freedom from your gilded cage, didn't you? He reached in and grabbed my arm. Not roughly, but with absolute certainty that I would obey. He pulled me from the carriage, and I stumbled into the freezing mud. My silk slippers were immediately soaked through. He dragged me across a field toward a dark shape rising from the ground. As we got closer, I realized what it was. A cave. The entrance yawned like a mouth in the hillside. No. The word ripped from my throat. No, please no. You wanted out of your cage? He propelled me forward, toward that darkness. You wanted to be free of duty and family and all those chains? We reached the entrance and he shoved me inside. I fell to my hands and knees on cold stone. Then be free, Lady Elara. Be free of everything. I scrambled to my feet, spinning to face him, but he was already walking away. Wait! I lunged for the entrance. He turned, and in the moonlight, his scarred face looked like something carved from granite. You wanted freedom? Here is the freedom of being forgotten. Then he bent down, gripped something I hadn't seen in the darkness, and pulled. A massive stone, rigged with ropes and counterweights, began to roll. I threw myself at the entrance, but I was too slow. The stone ground into place with a sound like the earth splitting open, and then there was nothing. Nothing but darkness. Nothing but silence. Nothing but the cold, and the dark, and the terrible understanding that no one was coming. The darkness was absolute. I'd never known darkness like this. Even on the moonless nights of my childhood, there had always been something. A sliver of light under the door, the ember glow of a dying fire, stars glimpsed through curtains. This was different. This was the darkness of the grave. I pressed my hands against the stone that sealed the entrance. It was cold, rough, immovable. I pushed. Nothing. I dug my fingers into the gaps around its edges, trying to find purchase, trying to find any weakness. My nails bent and tore. The stone didn't budge. Help! My voice cracked and echoed back at me from the cave walls. Someone help me. No answer. Of course there was no answer. We were on the Duke's lands, in the middle of nowhere, and he'd been the one who sealed me in. Who was going to help? Please! I pounded on the stone until my palms went numb. Please, let me out. I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. The only response was my own voice, mocking me from the darkness. Time stopped meaning anything. Minutes? Hours? I screamed until my throat was raw. I beat against the walls until my hands were slick with blood I couldn't see. I felt my way around the entrance, searching desperately for any crack, any weakness, any possible way out. There was none. Finally, my legs gave out and I collapsed against the stone, my ruined hands pressed against its surface. The cold was seeping through my dress now, thin silk that had been chosen to look beautiful, not to keep me alive. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The smell of the cave pressed in around me. Damp earth, old stone, and something else. Something organic and decaying that I didn't want to think about. My mind kept circling back to the moment the stone had sealed shut. The finality of it. The Duke's face cold and certain. He meant this. He actually meant to leave me here to die. And the worst part? No one would even look for me here. They'd think I'd run off to the city, maybe try to board a ship. Father would be furious. Fenris would be insulted. Eventually, they'd assume I'd gotten myself killed in some gutter or brothel, and that would be the end of Lady Elara Blackthorn. No one would think to search a sealed cave on the beast's land. I don't know when the screaming stopped and the crying started. I don't know when the crying became dry, painful sobs that produced no tears. Eventually, even that stopped. I sat in the darkness, hugging my knees to my chest, feeling the cold work its way deeper into my bones. This was how I died. Not in some dramatic fashion, not fighting for my freedom. Just slowly, quietly, forgotten in a hole in the ground. I thought about my mother, about the vacant look in her eyes at the ball. She'd been buried alive too, in her own way, just in a different kind of cage. At least she'd had warmth, food, life, even if it was barely worth living. What did I have? Darkness, cold, stone, and time. Too much time to think about my choices. Too much time to wonder if I'd made a horrible mistake. Should I have married Fenris? At least I'd be alive. At least I'd be warm. No. The thought cut through my spiraling panic like a knife. No. I pressed my bloodied palms against the stone floor, feeling the solid reality of it. I was alive right now. My heart was beating. Air was moving in and out of my lungs. I wasn't dead yet. And I'd be damned if I gave the Duke the satisfaction of dying quietly. Do you hear me? I spoke into the darkness, my voice hoarse but steady. I'm not going to die for you. I'm not going to make this easy. The cave swallowed my words, but I meant them. I'd escaped one cage tonight. I'd find a way out of this one too. Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself to my feet. My legs shook, but they held. I pressed one hand against the wall to steady myself and began to move deeper into the cave, away from the sealed entrance. If there was one way in, maybe there was another way out. Maybe. I learned to navigate the cave like a blind woman, because that's what I'd become. My hands were my eyes now, trailing along rough stone walls, testing each step before I took it. The cave floor was uneven, littered with loose rocks that threatened to turn my ankle with every step. I counted my paces at first. 30 steps from the entrance before the cave opened up into a larger chamber. 15 more before my reaching hand found the wall again. But in the absolute darkness, numbers started to lose meaning. Was that the same wall I'd touched before, or had I walked in a circle? Panic tried to claw its way back up my throat. I forced it down. The air was cold but not stale. That meant something. Air had to come from somewhere, had to go somewhere. The cave wasn't completely sealed. It was during my third circuit of what I thought was the main chamber that my foot kicked something that rattled. I dropped to my knees, feeling frantically in the darkness. My fingers closed around something small and hard. A stone, but different from the others, smooth on one side, sharp on the other. I'd read about this in one of the books Father had forbidden me to read, calling them unsuitable for young ladies. Flint. My heart began to race. Fire. If I could make fire, I'd have light. warmth, hope. I gathered loose stones frantically, testing each one, creating a small pile of the ones that felt promising. My fingers found something else, dried moss growing in a crack in the wall. I pulled it free carefully, trying to preserve as much as I could. The books had made it sound simple. Strike flint against stone, catch a spark, blow it into flame. They'd lied. I struck the stones together and heard the click but saw nothing. Again. Nothing. Again and again and again, until my arms ached and my raw hands screamed in protest. The darkness remained absolute. Maybe I was doing it wrong. Maybe I needed different stones. Maybe a spark. So brief I thought I'd imagined it, a tiny orange star that lived and died in a fraction of a second. Yes. The word came out as a sob. Yes, come on, please. I positioned the moss carefully where I thought the spark would fall. I struck again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Again. Spark. I saw it land in the moss. I dropped the stones and bent close, blowing gently, praying to gods I'd cursed hours ago. The spark glowed brighter, then died. No. I tried again. My arms felt like they might fall off. Strike. Nothing. Strike. Spark. Blow. The spark caught. A tiny orange glow appeared in the moss, so small it was barely visible. I blew again, gentle as a whisper. The glow grew. A tendril of smoke rose. Then suddenly, miraculously, flame. Light flooded the cave, real, actual light, and I gasped at the sudden beauty of it. The flame was tiny, barely the size of my thumbnail, but it pushed back the darkness like a conquering army. I fed it carefully, adding more moss, then small twigs I found scattered on the cave floor. The fire grew. Soon I had a small blaze going in a depression in the stone floor, and the cave was revealed. It was larger than I'd thought, the ceiling lost in shadows above me. The walls were rough and gray, marked with streaks of darker stone. But what caught my attention was the pile of debris in one corner. Old wood, rotted fabric, what looked like the remains of a basket. Someone had been here before, maybe used this cave for storage. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was the fire. What mattered was that I'd done this. Me, Lady Elara Blackthorn, who wasn't supposed to know anything more useful than needlepoint and dancing. I'd made fire in a lightless cave with my bare hands. I looked at my ruined palms, bloody and blistered, and smiled. The Duke thought he'd buried a helpless girl. He had no idea what he'd done. I wasn't just a lady anymore. I was a master of flame, a conqueror of darkness, and I was going to survive this. The fire gave me light and warmth, but it couldn't give me what I needed most: food. The hunger started as a whisper on the first day, just a hollow feeling in my stomach that I could ignore. By the second day, it had become a steady ache. By the third, it was a roaring beast that consumed every thought. I'd found water, at least. A slow drip from a crack in the ceiling, falling into a shallow depression in the stone. I'd cupped my hands under it, waiting precious minutes for enough to gather for a single swallow. It tasted of minerals and stone, but it was clean and cold and kept me alive. But water wasn't enough. My body was burning through its reserves, and I could feel myself getting weaker. My hands shook. My thoughts moved sluggishly. I needed protein, fat, energy. I needed food. The cave wasn't empty of life. I'd seen them in the firelight. Small things skittering across the walls. Crickets, beetles, things that made my stomach turn just to look at. I tried to ignore them. Surely I could last a few more days. Surely someone would come, or I'd find a way out, or who was I fooling? No one was coming. The Duke had left me here to die, and die I would, unless I did something about it. On the fourth day, I caught a cricket. It was almost an accident. The insect had jumped near the fire, and my hand shot out on pure instinct. My fingers closed around its small, struggling body. I stared at it in the firelight. It was brown and ugly, its legs twitching against my palm. The thought of eating it made bile rise in my throat. But the alternative was starving. I closed my eyes and bit down. The texture was worse than I'd imagined. Crunchy on the outside, soft inside, with a bitter, earthy taste that made me gag. I forced myself to chew, to swallow, to keep it down even as my body tried to reject it. Then I caught another, and another. Each one got a little easier. Not pleasant, never pleasant, but possible. My body was screaming for sustenance, and disgust was a luxury I couldn't afford. I became a hunter in my little cave. I learned where the crickets liked to hide in the crevices. I learned to move slowly, to strike quickly. I learned to eat without thinking about what I was eating. The water from the ceiling drip wasn't enough for drinking and cleaning, so I had to think. I'd read something once in a book about ancient peoples. They'd heated stones in fires and used them to boil water in containers that couldn't be placed directly on flames. I had hot stones. I had water. I had a naturally bowl-shaped depression in the cave floor. It took careful work. Heating stones in the fire until they glowed, then using strips of fabric torn from my underskirts to carefully carry them to the water-filled depression. The first stone I dropped and hit the water with a violent hiss, steam erupting in a cloud. The water bubbled and churned. It worked. I did it again and again, heating the water until it was hot enough to kill whatever might be living in it. The steam rose around me, warm and clean, and for the first time in days, I felt almost human. I used some of the hot water to clean my wounds. My hands were infected, the cuts from beating on the stone now angry and red. The hot water made them throb, but it was better than letting them rot. I was surviving. Not comfortably, not pleasantly, but surviving. The lady who'd entered this cave would have died of disgust and horror within the first 2 days. But I wasn't her anymore. I'd shed that skin like a snake, leaving behind the soft, pampered creature who'd feared insects and couldn't bear discomfort. What remained was harder, meaner, more determined. I fed the fire and caught another cricket, crunching it down without hesitation. The Duke had left me in here to die. I was learning to live instead. The isolation was worse than the hunger. I'd never been truly alone before. There had always been someone, servants, tutors, my parents, other nobles. Even when I'd hidden in the library to escape Father's lectures, I could hear footsteps in the hall, voices in other rooms. I was alone now in a way I'd never imagined possible. The silence pressed against my ears like a physical weight. My own breathing sounded too loud. The crackle of the fire became a symphony, and in that silence, my mind began to turn against me. The shadows cast by the flames started to look wrong. That one against the far wall, was it just a trick of the light, or was it shaped like a man? That flicker at the edge of my vision, just the fire dancing or something moving? I knew it was my mind playing tricks. I knew it, but knowing didn't help when I turned and saw him standing there. Duke Kalen, at the edge of the firelight, watching me with those cold silver eyes. "You're not real," I said aloud. My voice sounded strange after hours of silence. "You're not here." The phantom didn't answer. He just stood there, arms crossed, that scarred face impassive. "You left me here to die," I continued, and now I was talking to him like he was real, like he could hear me. Maybe I was going mad. Maybe I'd been mad for days and just hadn't noticed. "But I'm not dead yet. Do you see this fire, Kalen? You can't put me out." The ghost tilted his head, and I could almost imagine amusement in those cold eyes. "I ate crickets today," I told him, laughing, a sound that was half sob, half triumph. "Lady Elara Blackthorn, daughter of a lord, ate insects off the cave floor and didn't even vomit. What do you think of that?" No answer, just that steady, judging stare. Over the following days, or was it weeks now? The ghost became my companion, my witness. Sometimes I ranted at him, telling him about each small victory. Sometimes I was silent, and we simply shared the fire's warmth. "I found another source of water today," I told the phantom one evening. "A hole seep in the back wall, and I made a knife. Look, I held up my creation. A piece of flint I'd patiently chipped and sharpened against stone. It had taken days of work, my fingers bleeding from dozens of small cuts. But I'd done it. The edge was crude but sharp. Sharp enough to cut. Sharp enough to kill if it came to that. I could kill you with this, I said conversationally to the ghost. If you were real, if you came back, I could put it right between your ribs before you even saw me move. The phantom seemed to smile at that. I realized what was happening, of course. Some distant, rational part of my mind understood that the Duke wasn't really there, that I was talking to myself, that isolation was eroding my sanity bit by bit. But I didn't care, because the ghost kept me sharp, kept me angry, kept me focused on surviving not just for myself, but to prove him wrong. Every cricket I caught, every fire I lit, every day I lived was a slap in his smug, scarred face. You thought I'd die whimpering in the dark, I whispered to the phantom. You thought I was just another soft, noble girl who couldn't survive without her servants and her silk dresses. But you were wrong. I ran my thumb along the edge of my flint knife, feeling its sharpness, its promise. When I get out of here, not if, when. I'm coming for you. Do you understand that? This isn't over. This hasn't even begun. The ghost watched me from the shadows, and whether it was real or imagined, I saw respect in those cold eyes. Good. He should be afraid. I'd been huddled against the back wall, trying to conserve warmth, when I felt it. A draft. It was so faint I thought I'd imagined it at first, just the barest whisper of moving air against my cheek. I pressed closer to the wall, feeling along its surface with my raw hands. There. The stone here was different, colder, and when I dug my fingers into the gaps between stones, dirt crumbled away. This wall wasn't solid rock like the rest of the cave. It was earth, packed dirt and stones, but earth nonetheless. My heart began to pound. I scrambled to my knees, pressing my face against the wall, breathing in. Yes, there was definitely air moving, carrying the faintest hint of something green. Something alive. Something outside. This was my way out. The hunger, the cold, the phantom Duke watching from the shadows. All of it faded away. My entire world narrowed to this wall, to this single purpose. I would dig. I would dig until my fingers fell off. I would dig until I broke through or died trying. I started with my hands, clawing at the packed earth like an animal. Dirt wedged under my broken nails and into the infected cuts on my palms. I didn't care. I dug. When my hands became too painful to use, I grabbed my flint knife and attacked the wall with it, stabbing and prying at the stones, loosening the soil around them. Small rocks tumbled free. I tossed them aside and dug deeper. Hours passed. Days. I lost track. I dug until I collapsed, slept fitfully by the fire, then dragged myself back to the wall and dug more. My hands weren't hands anymore, just raw, bleeding things at the ends of my arms. My fingernails were gone. My palms were stripped of skin. I dug anyway. The pile of excavated dirt and stone grew behind me. The depression in the wall grew deeper. I'd created a tunnel now, barely wide enough for my shoulders, angling upward through the packed earth. Keep going, I told myself, my voice cracked and strange. Just keep going. The phantom Duke watched from beside the fire. Sometimes I imagined he looked worried. Afraid. I asked him, laughing as I stabbed my knife into the wall. You should be. I'm coming through this wall, and then I'm coming for you. My knife struck something and the blade snapped. No. I stared at the broken flint in my hand. It had been my tool, my weapon, my companion. And now it was useless, just a chunk of stone with a jagged break where the blade had been. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wall had consumed everything. My strength, my sanity, weeks of my life. And now, just when I was so close, my tool had failed. I looked at my ruined hands, at the broken knife, at the wall that still stood between me and freedom. Then I grabbed the largest piece of broken flint and kept digging. I used my hands when the stone was too awkward. I used the broken knife when my hands gave out. I used my forehead when both failed, butting against stubborn rocks like a ram until my vision swam with stars. The draft grew stronger. I dug faster, feeling a manic energy overtaking exhaustion. I was close. I had to be close. My knife, the piece I'd been using, punched through, not into solid earth, into nothing. I froze, my hand extended into empty space. Cold air rushed past my arm, real air, outside air. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I attacked the opening with renewed fury, widening it, tearing at the earth with my bare hands. The hole grew larger, larger, light, pale, silvery light, moonlight, cut through the darkness, painting the dusty air with hope. I'd broken through to the outside world. I collapsed against the tunnel wall, gasping, laughing, crying. My whole body shook. I'd done the impossible. I'd survived. Behind me, the fire crackled. The Phantom Duke was gone. I didn't need him anymore. I needed only myself. The hole was barely large enough. When I'd first broken through, I'd been so relieved I hadn't considered the reality of squeezing my body through a gap I'd carved while half mad with hunger and exhaustion. But I wasn't staying in this cave another moment. I'd rather die trying to escape than spend one more second in this tomb. I pushed my arms through first, feeling the cold night air on my skin, a sensation so glorious I almost wept. Then my head and shoulders. The earth scraped against my ribs. My hips caught on the edges. I was stuck. Panic fluttered in my chest, but I forced it down. To come too far. Endured too much. I wasn't giving up now. I exhaled completely, making myself as small as possible, and pushed. The earth tore at my skin. I felt the last remnants of my silk dress, already shredded beyond recognition, rip away. Stones scraped my stomach raw. My hips ground against the hole's edges. And then, suddenly, I was through. I tumbled out onto cold grass, gasping in lungfuls of fresh air. Above me, stars wheeled in a black sky, more beautiful than any chandelier in any ballroom. The moon hung fat and silver, painting the world in shades of gray and black. I was out. I was free. I pushed myself to my knees, then slowly, painfully, to my feet. My legs shook. My whole body shook. I looked down at myself in the moonlight and barely recognized what I saw. My dress was gone, reduced to strategic tatters that clung to my frame. My skin was streaked with dirt, blood, and things I didn't want to identify. My hair, once carefully pinned and perfumed, hung in matted ropes down my back. I was skeletal, my ribs visible through my torn clothing, my arms nothing but bone and sinew. I looked like a corpse that had clawed its way out of a grave. I looked like exactly what I was, a girl who died in that cave and been reborn as something else entirely. I turned to look at my escape route. The hole was barely visible in the hillside, a small dark mouth in the earth. Beyond it, I could see the shape of the cave entrance, the massive stone still rolled firmly in place. The Duke had sealed me in to die. He'd failed. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, cracked and wild, but genuine. I threw my head back and laughed at the moon, at the stars, at the cruel joke of it all. I'm alive! I screamed into the night. Do you hear me, Kalen? I'm alive! The forest around me was silent except for the whisper of wind through bare branches. I oriented myself, trying to figure out which direction to go. Away from Raven's higher lands. Away from the Duke. Toward civilization, toward... I heard it then. Distant but unmistakable. The baying of hounds. I froze, my triumph turning instantly to ice in my veins. The sound came again, closer now. Not just one dog, many. A hunting pack in full cry. And they were coming toward me. No, couldn't be. It was the middle of the night. Who would be hunting? The Duke. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He knew. Somehow he knew I'd gotten out. Or maybe he'd always known. Maybe this had been part of his plan all along. Seal me in the cave, wait for me to either die or escape, and then hunt me down like an animal. The bastard had turned my escape into a game. The baying grew louder. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush now, could hear men's voices shouting to each other. They were close. Too close. I should run. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I didn't. I stood in that moonlit clearing, covered in filth and blood, more animal than lady, and smiled. Let them come. I'd survived weeks sealed in a lightless cave. I'd eaten insects and made fire with my bare hands. I dug through solid earth until my fingers were nothing but raw meat and bone. I died and been reborn in that darkness. They thought they were hunting a helpless girl. They had no idea what was waiting for them. I bent down and picked up a sharp stone from the ground. Not as good as my flint knife, but it would do. My hand closed around it, blood seeping between my fingers. The hounds burst through the tree line, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. Behind them, torches, men on horseback, and at their head, I could see him, the Duke, tall and dark on a massive black stallion. He reined in his horse, staring at me across the clearing. Even at this distance, I could see the shock on his scarred face. He'd expected to find a corpse, or a broken, whimpering thing begging for mercy. What he found was a predator, teeth bared, ready to fight. "Call off your dogs," I said. My voice was rough, barely human, but it carried across the clearing with perfect clarity. "Or I'll add their bones to the ones I left in your cave." For a long moment, nobody moved. The hounds circled, snarling, but didn't attack. The Duke sat frozen on his horse, his hand raised to hold back his men. Then, impossibly, he smiled. A real smile, not the cold mockery from before. This one held something else. Something that might have been admiration, or fear. "My lady," he said, and his voice held a note I'd never heard in it before. "What have you become?" I smiled back, all teeth, more wolf than woman. "Your mistake," I answered. The hunt had just begun. But this time, the Duke was going to learn what it felt like to be prey. He might have left a lady for dead in that cave, but a predator had just climbed out. The end. Dear listener, the carriage ride may be over, but the romance doesn't have to end here. If this story of heartbreak and redemption touched your soul, if you felt the cold walls of the manor turn into a home filled with love, then please leave a like and share this tale with a friend who believes in happy endings. Your support is the heartbeat of this channel. It allows us to keep uncovering the most scandalous, passionate, and unforgettable legends of love. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an invitation to our next ball. But don't leave just yet. A new scandal is already brewing. Click the video on your screen now to step into another world where your next beautiful story awaits. I'll see you there.